The radar screen flickered once, then went completely dark. Admiral Marcus Whitfield stared at the blank display in the Joint Operations Center, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the console until his knuckles went white. 47 years of naval aviation, 3 wars, and countless training exercises had never prepared him for this moment. The impossible had just happened over the South China Sea. "Sir, we've lost all contact with Viper 7, the radar operator's voice cracked through the silence. Last known position was 200 nautical miles southeast of Guam. She was tracking something that shouldn't exist." The Admiral's jaw tightened. Viper 7. The call sign belonged to Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Kes Nakamura, a pilot whose reputation preceded her like smoke before fire. Some called her the best stick-and-rudder pilot in the Pacific Fleet. Others whispered she was trouble wrapped in a flight suit, too aggressive, too willing to push boundaries that should remain sacred. Today, those boundaries had apparently pushed back. "What do you mean, tracking something that shouldn't exist?" Whitfield's voice cut through the ambient hum of electronics and hushed conversations that filled the operations center. Every technician, every analyst, every officer within earshot had gone still, waiting for an answer that would either make sense of the chaos or plunge them deeper into it. The young petty officer swallowed hard, his fingers dancing across his keyboard as he pulled up the last telemetry data. "Sir, at 13:47 hours, Lieutenant Commander Nakamura reported visual contact with an unidentified aircraft, but according to our systems, there was nothing there. No radar signature, no heat signature, no electronic emissions." Then her F-18 Super Hornet began tracking something moving at speeds that physics says aren't possible. Admiral Whitfield had seen phantom contacts before, radar ghosts that appeared and vanished like mirages in the electronic desert of modern warfare. But Kes Nakamura wasn't the type to chase shadows. She was methodical, precise, the kind of pilot who checked her instruments twice and trusted her training above all else. If she said she had visual contact, she had visual contact. The question that gnawed at him wasn't what she had seen. The question was why every piece of advanced tracking equipment in the United States Navy had suddenly gone blind the moment she engaged whatever was out there. And why, in the growing silence that followed, he found himself remembering something his old flight instructor had told him decades ago. "Son, the sky keeps more secrets than it shares." Now, as the Pacific stretched endlessly beyond the operations center's reinforced windows, Admiral Whitfield wondered if one of those secrets had finally decided to reveal itself, and whether Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Nakamura would live to tell the tale. The morning had started like any other patrol mission over the South China Sea. Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Nakamura had launched from the USS Carl Vinson at 800 hours, her F-18F Super Hornet cutting through the humid air with the precision that had earned her respect among the squadron's more traditional pilots. They called her Kes because her real name felt too soft for someone who flew like she had something to prove. And maybe she did. "Viper 7, this is Tower. You're cleared for standard patrol route Alpha 7. Weather's clear, winds light and variable. Should be a milk run today." The air traffic controller's voice crackled through her helmet comm system with the casual indifference of routine. "Copy, Tower. Viper 7 departing on schedule." Kes adjusted her grip on the stick, feeling the familiar weight of 47,000 pounds of American engineering respond to her touch. The Super Hornet was an extension of her will, a marriage of human intuition and technological precision that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments and countless training exercises that tried their best to kill her. But something felt different today. Maybe it was the way the morning light seemed to bend differently through her canopy, or the subtle vibration in her seat that hadn't been there during yesterday's flight. Pilots learned to trust these instincts because the alternative was usually written on a gravestone. Kes had learned this lesson earlier than most. 3 years ago, she'd been the only survivor of a mid-air collision during a training exercise over Nevada. The official investigation blamed mechanical failure, but Kes knew better. She'd felt something wrong in the minutes before impact, a wrongness that whispered through the aircraft's systems like a ghost in the machine. She tried to warn her wingman, but radio protocol and masculine pride had conspired against urgency. By the time Lieutenant Bradley Morrison believed her instincts, it was too late. That crash had earned her a reputation for being overcautious, hypersensitive to phantom problems that existed only in her imagination. Her squadron commander had recommended her for a desk job. Her peers started calling her Chicken Little behind her back, the pilot who cried sky falling every time a gauge flickered. The Navy had kept her flying, but barely, and every mission felt like an audition for her own career. Today, that same wrongness was creeping through her instruments like fog through a harbor. Her heads-up display showed normal readings across the board, but something deeper, something that lived in the space between numbers and intuition, was screaming warnings she couldn't articulate. The sky ahead looked peaceful, innocent as a postcard, but Kess had learned not to trust appearances. She checked her position, 200 nautical miles southeast of Guam, exactly where she was supposed to be, flying exactly the route she was supposed to fly. Everything was perfectly, utterly normal, which was exactly what worried her most. Tower, this is Viper 7. I'm seeing some unusual atmospheric conditions out here. Nothing specific, just something feels off. Even as she said it, Kess knew how it sounded. Chicken Little crying wolf again. The response came back with barely concealed impatience. Copy, Viper 7. All weather reports show clear conditions. Continue mission as planned. Kess keyed her mic to respond, then thought better of it. Instead, she focused on the horizon, where something that shouldn't have been there was beginning to take shape against the endless blue of the Pacific sky. The object materialized slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. At first, Kess thought it might be another aircraft, perhaps a commercial airliner off course or a military transport she hadn't been briefed about. But as it grew larger in her field of vision, every assumption she'd made about the nature of flight began to crumble. It moved wrong, not like an airplane pushing through air with wings and engines, but like something that had negotiated a separate peace with gravity. The craft, and she could think of no better word for it, seemed to flow through the sky rather than fly through it, its movements too smooth, too effortless, too completely divorced from the brutal physics that governed everything else in her world. Tower, Viper 7. I have visual contact with an unidentified aircraft bearing 090, approximately 15 nautical miles and closing. Request identification and instructions. Her voice remained steady, professional, but her heart was hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Viper 7, we show no traffic in your area. Repeat, no traffic on scope. Please confirm your position and heading. Kess glanced at her instruments, then back at the impossible thing growing larger in her windscreen. Her radar was painting nothing. Her infrared systems showed empty sky. Every electronic sensor designed to detect aircraft was telling her she was alone up here, while her eyes insisted otherwise with increasing urgency. Tower, I have positive visual identification of an unknown aircraft. It's not showing up on any of my systems, but I can see it clear as day. The craft appears to be approximately 100 feet in length, delta wing configuration, no visible means of propulsion. She paused, knowing how insane she sounded. It's moving at impossible speeds and changing direction without banking or turning. Static filled her headset for a long moment before the tower responded. Viper 7, you are ordered to break off and return to base immediately. Do not, repeat, do not engage unidentified aircraft. But the object had already changed course, now moving directly toward her position with deliberate intent. Kess felt her training take over, muscle memory overriding the disbelief that threatened to paralyze her. She armed her radar, switched to combat mode, and prepared for an intercept that every law of physics insisted couldn't be happening. The unknown craft closed the distance between them in seconds, moving with a fluidity that made her Super Hornet feel like a brick thrown through honey. As it passed within 1,000 feet of her position, Kess caught a glimpse of something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and along what might have been its hull, symbols that looked almost familiar, as if she'd seen them before in dreams she couldn't quite remember. Then her radar screen exploded with contacts that hadn't been there a moment before, and the sky around her became something else entirely. The radar screen lit up like a Christmas tree having a seizure. Contacts appeared and vanished in impossible patterns, some moving at speeds that suggested they were traveling faster than sound without producing sonic booms, others hanging motionless in the air as if gravity had forgotten they existed. Kess watched her instruments struggle to make sense of what they were detecting, displaying readouts that violated everything she knew about aerodynamics. Tower Viper 7. My scope is showing multiple contacts. Count. I'm reading at least 30 unknown aircraft in my immediate vicinity. Her voice carried the forced calm of someone watching reality tear apart at the seams. None of them appeared gradually. They just materialized. Viper 7, we're not seeing any of this. Your position shows clear airspace. Check your systems for malfunction. Kess ran through her diagnostic routines with practiced efficiency, but every system reported normal operation. The contacts on her screen weren't ghost echoes or electronic interference. They were solid, consistent, and moving with purpose that suggested intelligence behind their flight patterns. More disturbing still, they seemed to be arranging themselves around her position in what looked suspiciously like a formation. She banked left, testing their response. Half the contacts mirrored her movement with perfect precision, maintaining exact distance and spacing, as if connected to her aircraft by invisible strings. The other half continued their incomprehensible dance through the sky, appearing and disappearing like thoughts half remembered. "This is impossible," she whispered into her oxygen mask, forgetting that her radio was still transmitting. "What's impossible, Viper 7?" Kess realized she'd spoken aloud and tried to regain some semblance of professional composure. "Tower, I need to report that these contacts are responding to my movements. They appear to be observing me." The silence that followed stretched longer than any gap in radio communication should. When the tower finally responded, the voice belonged to someone with more authority and considerably more concern than the routine air traffic controller she'd been speaking with moments before. "Viper 7, this is Admiral Whitfield. I'm ordering you to maintain current heading and altitude. Do not take any aggressive action. We're scrambling additional aircraft to your position." Admiral Whitfield. Even Kess, with her complicated relationship with the Navy's command structure, recognized that name. The man was a legend, a pilot's pilot who'd flown everything from F-14 Tomcats to the latest stealth fighters. If he was personally monitoring her situation, things had escalated far beyond a simple equipment malfunction. "Copy, Admiral. Maintaining current heading and altitude. But sir, I need to advise you that whatever's up here with me, it's not in any manual I've ever read." One of the contacts on her screen began moving toward her position, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. As it closed the distance, Kess felt a strange sensation wash over her, as if the air around her aircraft had suddenly become thick with electricity. Her instruments flickered, displaying readings that made no sense before returning to normal. The approaching contact passed directly through her position. According to her radar, it occupied the same space as her Super Hornet for a fraction of a second. She felt nothing, saw nothing, but every warning light in her cockpit illuminated simultaneously before going dark again. In that moment of impossible intersection, Kess experienced something that would change her understanding of everything she thought she knew about flying, about physics, about the nature of the sky itself. She felt observed, studied, cataloged by an intelligence that was vast and patient and utterly alien to human experience. The contact appeared on the other side of her aircraft and rejoined the formation that continued its ethereal dance around her position. Kess tried to speak, to report what had just happened, but found that words seemed inadequate to describe an experience that existed outside the boundaries of normal human language. Instead, she gripped her stick tighter and tried to remember how to breathe while surrounded by impossibility at 25,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Admiral Whitfield stood before the main display screen in the Joint Operations Center, watching telemetry data that challenged 47 years of accumulated military experience. The numbers streaming across multiple monitors told a story that his mind kept trying to reject, even as his trained eye recognized the precision and consistency that marked genuine sensor data rather than system malfunction. "Sir, we've got two F-22 Raptors en route to Lieutenant Commander Nakamura's position. ETA 12 minutes. The operations officer's voice carried the strained professionalism of someone trying to process the impossible while maintaining military bearing. "Good, what about satellite coverage?" "We've repositioned 3 reconnaissance satellites to focus on her coordinates. The imagery is unusual." Admiral Whitfield turned toward the intelligence analyst, a sharp-eyed commander named Elena Vasquez, who'd spent the last 15 years interpreting satellite photography from some of the world's most sensitive locations. If she called something unusual, it deserved attention. "Show me." The main screen flickered, then displayed a real-time satellite image of the South China Sea. At the center of the frame, a single aircraft moved across the blue expanse, Kess Nakamura's Super Hornet, clearly visible and precisely where it should be. But surrounding her position, the image showed something that made Admiral Whitfield's breath catch in his throat. Distortions. Not aircraft, not solid objects, but areas where the light seemed to bend differently, where the normal patterns of ocean and sky appeared subtly altered. They moved in formation around the Super Hornet, maintaining precise positions that suggested coordination and intelligence. "The distortions are consistent with Lieutenant Commander Nakamura's radar contacts," Commander Vasquez reported. "Whatever's up there is affecting electromagnetic radiation across multiple spectrums. Our satellites can detect the effects, but they can't resolve the objects causing them." Admiral Whitfield had encountered classified phenomena before, experimental aircraft that pushed the boundaries of known technology, but this was different. This was beyond the reach of human engineering, at least as he understood it. The question facing him now wasn't just what was happening to one of his pilots, but how to respond to a situation that fell outside every protocol and procedure in the military handbook. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Viper 7. Kess Nakamura's voice filled the operations center, steady, but carrying an undertone of awe that suggested she was witnessing something that had fundamentally altered her understanding of reality. "Tower, this is Viper 7. The unknown contacts have arranged themselves in what appears to be a ceremonial formation. They're not threatening. This feels more like a greeting." Admiral Whitfield keyed his microphone. "Viper 7, this is Admiral Whitfield. Describe what you're seeing in as much detail as possible." "Sir, I'm surrounded by approximately 30 craft that don't conform to any aerodynamic principles I understand. They're maintaining perfect formation, moving without visible means of propulsion, and they seem to be communicating with each other somehow. My instruments pick up patterns in the electromagnetic spectrum that feel almost like language." The Admiral exchanged glances with Commander Vasquez. Language. That single word transformed this incident from an equipment malfunction or atmospheric phenomenon into something that required an entirely different category of response. "Lieutenant Commander, are you in any immediate danger?" "Negative, sir. Whatever their intentions, they don't seem hostile. In fact, She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a note of wonder that reminded Admiral Whitfield why he'd originally fallen in love with flying. "Sir, I think they're trying to show me something." At that moment, every screen in the Joint Operations Center went dark simultaneously, plunging the room into a silence that felt pregnant with possibility and threat in equal measure. The darkness lasted exactly 7 seconds. When the screens flickered back to life, they displayed something that would be classified at the highest levels of government and debated in secure facilities for decades to come. Instead of standard radar returns and satellite imagery, every monitor in the Joint Operations Center showed the same thing: a three-dimensional map of the Pacific Ocean that extended far beyond the range of any terrestrial sensing equipment. The map was impossibly detailed, showing ocean currents, underwater topography, and weather patterns with precision that exceeded anything in the Navy's databases. But what made Admiral Whitfield's blood run cold were the markers scattered across the display, hundreds of them, indicating positions where similar encounters had apparently occurred over the past 70 years. "My God," whispered Commander Vasquez, "they've been monitoring us. All this time, they've been watching and cataloging every interaction." "Admiral, we're receiving a data stream from Viper 7's aircraft," the communications officer reported. "But it's not coming through normal channels. Somehow, information is being transmitted directly to our systems without using any of our communication protocols." The data flowing across their screens told the story of Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Nakamura's encounter from a perspective that no human had ever experienced. They were seeing her Super Hornet through sensors that operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding, watching the interaction unfold from the viewpoint of the unknown craft. In space above the Pacific, Kes felt her aircraft being gently guided into a new heading, not through any physical force, but through subtle adjustments in air pressure and electromagnetic fields that made turning in a specific direction feel like the most natural thing in the world. Her instruments registered the course change, but her body experienced it as a suggestion whispered in a language older than words. "Tower, I'm being directed toward coordinates that shouldn't be on any chart." Her voice carried a dreamy quality, as if she were speaking from inside a lucid dream. "There's something down there, something beneath the water that's been waiting." Admiral Whitfield gripped the edge of his console as the satellite feed shifted to follow Nakamura's new trajectory. The ocean below appeared normal at first glance, but as the image resolution increased, structures became visible beneath the waves. Geometric patterns too regular to be natural, too vast to be human-made, stretching across the seafloor in configurations that suggested purpose and intelligence. "Sir, we're detecting massive electromagnetic anomalies from that location," the sensor operator reported. "Whatever's down there has been dormant, but it's beginning to show signs of activation." The realization hit Admiral Whitfield like a physical blow. This wasn't first contact. This was a response to something humanity had done, or was about to do, that had triggered attention from intelligences that had been quietly observing from the depths of Earth's oceans for longer than human civilization had existed. "Get me a direct line to the Pentagon," he ordered, "and patch me through to Lieutenant Commander Nakamura. If she's about to become the first human being to make formal contact with another species, she's going to need guidance that no training manual ever covered." As the Super Hornet continued its guided descent toward coordinates that existed on no human map, Admiral Whitfield found himself wondering whether Kestrel Nakamura's reputation for being trouble might actually be exactly what this moment required. Sometimes, the most dangerous situations demanded pilots who were willing to fly beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom. Today, the conventional wisdom had proven catastrophically inadequate. The descent felt like falling through layers of consciousness. As Kes guided her Super Hornet toward the coordinates that had appeared on her navigation system without any input from her, the familiar weight of gravity seemed to fluctuate, creating moments where her body pressed against her harness, followed by intervals of weightlessness that defied every law of physics she understood. Viper 7 maintained constant communication. Admiral Whitfield's voice crackled through her headset. "We're recording everything. Whatever happens down there, make sure it gets back to us." "Copy, Admiral." Descending through 15,000 feet, the ocean below, she paused, searching for words to describe what her eyes were seeing. "Sir, the water is glowing. There are patterns of light moving beneath the surface, geometric shapes that seem to be responding to my approach." Through her canopy, Kess watched the Pacific Ocean transform into something that belonged in dreams rather than reality. Bioluminescent networks pulsed through the deep water, creating mandalas of light that stretched for miles in every direction. At the center of the display, directly below her current position, something massive was rising from the abyssal depths. The structure that emerged from the ocean violated every expectation she'd ever had about first contact. Instead of the metallic spacecraft of science fiction, what broke the surface appeared to be grown rather than built. Its curved surfaces resembling coral formations or deep-sea creatures scaled up to impossible proportions. It rose from the water without displacing it, as if the laws governing matter and energy had been suspended within its immediate vicinity. "Tower, I'm looking at a structure approximately 2 miles in diameter. It appears to be organic in nature but clearly artificial. The unknown contacts from earlier are moving toward it in formation." Kess found her voice becoming steadier as her training took over. In crisis situations, pilots fell back on procedures and protocols because clear communication could mean the difference between life and death. "Understood, Viper 7. Continue observation and reporting. Do not land or attempt physical contact without direct authorization." The structure continued to rise until it floated approximately 100 feet above the ocean's surface, water streaming from its biomechanical surfaces in patterns that seemed too perfect to be accidental. As Kess circled at a respectful distance, sections of the structure began to unfold like flower petals, revealing interiors that glowed with soft, warm light. "Admiral, I'm receiving some kind of invitation. I know how that sounds, but there's no other way to describe it. Something is communicating with me directly, not through radio but through something else. It's showing me where to land." Admiral Whitfield's response came immediately. "Negative, Viper 7. You are not authorized to land on that structure. Maintain your current altitude and continue observation." But even as he spoke, both he and Kess understood that authorization had become irrelevant. Whatever intelligence controlled the unknown craft had demonstrated capabilities that rendered human military protocol meaningless. If they wanted her to land, she would land. If they wanted her Super Hornet disabled or destroyed, it would happen regardless of any orders from Earth. The question facing both pilot and admiral wasn't whether Kess would make contact, but whether she would do so as a representative of humanity or as its victim. "Sir," Kess said quietly, "I don't think I have a choice anymore. My controls are responding, but not to my input. The aircraft is being guided toward a landing platform that's forming on the structure's surface." As her Super Hornet began its final approach to a rendezvous that would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe, Kess Nakamura realized that her reputation for sensing wrongness in routine situations had been preparation for this moment. She hadn't been experiencing mechanical problems or psychological stress. She'd been developing sensitivity to phenomena that existed beyond the boundaries of normal human perception. Today, that sensitivity was about to make her the most important pilot in human history. The landing platform materialized beneath her aircraft like a thought becoming reality. What had been empty air moments before solidified into a surface that seemed to anticipate her Super Hornet's approach vector, adjusting its position and angle to ensure a perfect touchdown. Kess felt her landing gear extend without any command from her, watched her airspeed decrease according to parameters that existed outside her control. Tower, I'm on final approach. Landing gear deployed, airspeed decreasing. The platform appears to be adapting to my aircraft's specifications. Her voice carried the surreal calm of someone experiencing the impossible while their training demanded professional reporting. Viper 7, we're still not authorizing this landing. Can you regain control of your aircraft? Kess tested her stick and rudder pedals, finding them responsive but somehow secondary to whatever force was guiding her descent. She could make minor adjustments, but the overall trajectory toward the organic structure remained fixed. It was as if her Super Hornet had become part of a larger dance, one choreographed by intelligence that understood her aircraft's capabilities better than she did. Negative, Admiral. I have partial control, but something else is handling the primary navigation. It's not hostile, it feels more like being helped by someone who's done this before. The touchdown was the gentlest landing she'd ever experienced. Her main gear touched the biomechanical surface without so much as a whisper of contact, followed by her nose wheel settling with the delicacy of a butterfly alighting on a flower. As her engine spooled down, Kess realized that the platform had absorbed the kinetic energy of her landing, converting it into something else entirely. Around her aircraft, the structure began to change. Walls grew upward from the platform's edges, not like mechanical construction, but like living tissue responding to stimulus. Within minutes, her Super Hornet sat enclosed in a chamber that provided complete protection from the elements while allowing her to monitor the outside environment through surfaces that appeared solid but functioned like transparent windows. Tower, I'm secure on the structure. My aircraft is enclosed but not restrained. Life support is functioning normally, and I'm detecting a breathable atmosphere outside my cockpit. She paused, watching patterns of light move through the chamber walls. Sir, I think they're scanning my aircraft, learning about our technology. In the Joint Operations Center, Admiral Whitfield watched satellite feeds that showed Lieutenant Commander Nakamura's Super Hornet apparently disappearing into the structure's interior. External sensors registered the aircraft's position, but visual contact had been lost as completely as if it had been swallowed by the sea. All stations, this is Admiral Whitfield. I'm declaring DEFCON 2 for Pacific Fleet operations. I want every available asset monitoring this situation, and I want direct communication with the Pentagon, the CIA, and anyone else who might have dealt with something like this before. Commander Vasquez looked up from her intelligence console. Admiral, we're receiving transmissions on frequencies that shouldn't exist. The signals appear to be coming from Lieutenant Commander Nakamura's position, but they're not using any communication protocols in our databases. Can you decode them? We're trying, but sir, I think they're not meant for us. I think they're communications between the structure and other locations around the planet. We're just overhearing them. Admiral Whitfield felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. One of his pilots was making first contact with an intelligence that had been observing humanity from the depths of Earth's oceans, possibly for centuries. Every decision he made in the next few hours would either advance human understanding or trigger consequences that might extend far beyond his ability to comprehend. Viper 7, are you still receiving me? Copy, Admiral. Still here, still breathing, still trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. What are you seeing, Lieutenant Commander? Kess looked around the chamber that had formed around her aircraft, watching patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Sir, I think I'm about to find out why they've been watching us all this time. The chamber began to fill with a presence that felt ancient and patient and utterly alien to human experience. Whatever was about to happen, Kess realized, would require her to be more than just a pilot. She would need to be humanity's first ambassador to a species that had been waiting in the depths for this moment to arrive. As the presence grew stronger, she began to understand why her instincts had been screaming warnings for years. She hadn't been sensing mechanical problems or atmospheric anomalies. She'd been detecting the attention of intelligences that existed just beyond the edge of human perception, watching and waiting for the right moment to make themselves known. That moment apparently was now. The presence didn't speak in words or images, but in concepts that bypassed language entirely and planted themselves directly in Kess's consciousness. She found herself understanding things about the structure, about the intelligences that had built it, about the reason for this encounter, without any intermediary process of communication or translation. They called themselves the Guardians, though that term was inadequate to describe beings whose existence spanned geological time scales. They had been present in Earth's oceans since before the emergence of complex life, not as invaders or colonizers, but as observers tasked with monitoring the development of consciousness across the galaxy. Humanity had reached a threshold. The same technological capabilities that allowed species to explore space and manipulate atomic forces also made them capable of destroying themselves and everything around them. Most species failed this test, succumbing to their own aggressive impulses before achieving true wisdom. But a precious few, learned to balance power with responsibility. The Guardians were here to determine which category humanity belonged to. Tower I'm receiving, not receiving exactly, but understanding information about why this is happening. Kess spoke carefully, knowing that her words were being recorded and would be analyzed by intelligence services around the world. They've been watching us, evaluating our development. This encounter is some kind of assessment. Admiral Whitfield's voice carried new urgency. Assessment of what? Our readiness to join a larger community. There are other species out there, Admiral, many of them, and some kind of governing body that decides when a species is mature enough to make contact. The implications hit the Joint Operations Center like a physical wave. If Kess was correct, humanity was on the verge of either acceptance into a galactic civilization or rejection that might result in isolation, or worse. What are they assessing specifically? Admiral Whitfield asked. Our ability to balance aggression with wisdom, our capacity for cooperation despite competition, and, she paused, receiving new information that made her breath catch. Our treatment of individuals who don't fit conventional patterns. They've been watching me specifically, Admiral, because of what happened 3 years ago. The crash that had nearly ended her career. The incident that had made her squadron mates question her judgment and her superiors doubt her stability. The Guardians had been observing her response to trauma, her persistence in the face of institutional skepticism, her willingness to trust her instincts despite mockery and marginalization. They're interested in how we treat people who see things differently, who experience reality in ways that challenge our assumptions. They consider this a crucial indicator of a species' potential for growth. Around her aircraft, the chamber began to shift and change, walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast ocean depths beyond. In the distance, other structures were becoming visible, rising from trenches and underwater mountain ranges where they had waited in dormancy for millennia. Admiral, there are more of them, dozens of structures across the Pacific. They're all activating simultaneously. The assessment wasn't limited to one pilot or one encounter. Across the world's oceans, similar events were unfolding as the Guardians emerged from their long vigil to evaluate humanity's readiness for the next phase of its existence. And at the center of it all, Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Nakamura sat in her Super Hornet, representing not just the United States Navy or American military power, but the entire human species in its first formal examination by intelligences that had been studying Earth since before the first humans had looked up at the stars and wondered what else might be out there. The weight of that responsibility should have been crushing. Instead, Kess found herself feeling something she hadn't experienced since before the crash that had changed her life. The absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Her reputation for sensing wrongness had prepared her for this moment, when everything would finally be made right. The examination began without ceremony or explanation, consciousness touching consciousness across the vast gulf that separated human intelligence from something far older and more vast. Kess felt her memories being gently explored, not invasively, but with the careful attention of a scholar studying precious manuscripts. The Guardians moved through her experiences with surgical precision, focusing on moments that revealed her essential character. They examined her childhood in rural Montana, where she'd learned to fly crop dusters before she could legally drive a car. They studied her decision to join the Navy despite having no family military tradition, driven by a combination of patriotism and pure love for the act of flight itself. They analyzed her performance in flight school, where she'd excelled academically while struggling with the social dynamics of a profession still adjusting to female combat pilots. But they spent the most time on the crash that had defined her career. Kess felt them experiencing her memory of that terrible morning, sensing the wrongness in her aircraft systems that her instruments couldn't quantify, her growing frustration as she tried to communicate danger that existed just beyond the threshold of measurable phenomena. Through the Guardian's perception, she relived Lieutenant Bradley Morrison's dismissive response to her warnings. She felt again the masculine skepticism that had greeted her intuitive understanding of her aircraft's condition, the way her concerns had been filtered through assumptions about female pilots being overly emotional or insufficiently rational. Then came the moment of impact, the sickening crunch of metal against metal as Morrison's F-18 collided with hers during a routine training exercise that should never have resulted in casualties. She experienced again the terror of ejection, the bone-jarring shock of parachute deployment, the helpless horror of watching Morrison's aircraft spiral toward the Nevada desert with no ejection seat activation. The Guardians absorbed every detail of her survival, her rescue, and the investigation that followed. They studied the official report that blamed mechanical failure while ignoring her pre-crash warnings. They observed the subtle ostracism that followed, the way her squadron mates began treating her intuitive abilities as liabilities rather than assets. Most importantly, they examined her response to institutional rejection. Instead of becoming bitter or abandoning her instincts, she had learned to trust them more completely while becoming more skilled at translating intuitive knowledge into language that satisfied military bureaucracy. She had developed resilience without losing sensitivity, strength without sacrificing empathy. "Tower, they're showing me something." Kess spoke carefully, aware that she was describing events that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The crash wasn't random. They've been monitoring individuals who demonstrate enhanced sensitivity to phenomena that exist just beyond normal human perception. The mechanical failure that caused the collision was influenced. Admiral Whitfield's response came immediately. Influenced how? They needed to observe how I wow.